Hey guys, Brian Stevens here with Mortgage Shots. I got Carl White from the Marketing Animals. Everybody knows them. We're going to discuss a couple of issues today. This one really kind of hits home to me, Carl. I think I understand the solution to this, but that doesn't mean that I always practice it. You know what I mean? It's a moving target when you're married, and it's a moving target with work. Everything is changing at work. But you said something a couple of moments ago prior to jumping on this call. You said, I want to talk about work at work and home issues. What does that mean?
So I had somebody reach out to me and say, Carl, how do you keep work at work and home at home? I don't want one to interfere with the other. You know, if I'm having issues at the house, I still need to bring in the bacon, which is all true. And I told him a story, which I'm going to share with our listeners here today, which was one of the most impactful pieces of advice literally I've ever gotten in my entire life. Number one, you're not going to separate work from work and home from home. It's one bucket. And I always give the example of if we get a jar of water and just say that's my life, right? That's home. And work is a little bit of red dye. As soon as I drop one drop of the red dye, in short order, the entire jar is red or pink.
Right.
And we can tell that ink, no, stay over on this side of the water. But it doesn't do that. And the same thing with us. That when we have issues going on at home, it's going to come to work with us. So I was about 10 years ago, I was sitting on the front porch with my young niece, and she had just gotten married like a year or two before. And Brian, like you, I've been married for 37 years. When I'm having this conversation with, I've been married for 27 years. And so I call her my punk niece, right? I say that, obviously I adore her. So here I had this person that had just been married for a year or two said, Carl, let me tell you the secret to marriage and why most people get a divorce. And at first I was like, what the heck is she going to tell me, right?
Right.
One that's been married 1 year so far, She said, the problem that most people have is they don't understand that we have two relationships with our spouse or our live-in partner. She said, number one, we have a roommate relationship. And then number two, we have a marriage or life partner relationship. And she said, the problem is people confuse those two. I said, what do you mean by that? She goes, well, roommate issues would be things like you drank the last milk, you didn't pick up more coffee, the TV's too loud, I'm trying to get to sleep.
Yep.
Those are roommate issues. You put out a cigarette on the porch and didn't sweep it all, whatever, right? Those are roommate issues. Marriage issues typically fall into three categories: beating, cheating, or addictions, none of which need to be made light of, right? All serious problems. But the problem is that most of us rarely have beaten, cheating, addiction issues. We have roommate issues. And what we do is we elevate those roommate issues into thinking they're a marriage issue, and they're not. They're just simply a roommate issue. And it doesn't mean that we don't address the roommate issues. It doesn't mean that leaving our shoes, on the kitchen table, so to speak, it's not something that's okay to do if it, pisses off your husband, your wife, your partner. But it's not a marriage issue. It's a roommate issue. And learning to categorize that, hey, these are roommate issues. Let's work through it. Don't elevate it to a marriage issue. I don't know. I just thought that was one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard. And so now when myself and the lovely Mrs. White are in a little spiff, right, it happens, we both recognize this is a roommate issue. Doesn't mean I can disrespect my roommate, but let's keep this at the level that it belongs at. It's a roommate issue, not a marriage issue. And once I had that going, it made my home life way better. And when my home life is good, my work life is good, and vice versa. So that was the piece of advice that my punk 1 year married niece gave me that literally changed my life.
I think outside of working, I think that's just great advice to give anybody who's in a relationship or who's married. I'm thinking of my daughter right now who has new roommates for the first time down in San Diego. And every one of my conversation is, we've all been there. We're not washing the dishes. They're not picking them up for the dog. Having been married for 30 years, and I think I've separated those pretty well. But again, we have our little bouts too, where we have disagreements and we will argue. And I'll tell you, when you use that analogy of the red dye in the glass of water, that's generally where it comes from for me. Now, you said, all right, so when things are better at home, they're better at work, and I agree with that. But when things are difficult at work, I tend to bring those home. And it doesn't manifest itself in, hey, today was a hard day at work. It manifests itself in, why do we have so many damn different dishes over here? Why can't we just do something about getting rid of all this crap? it turns into roommate issues. Considering how hard things are right now in the industry, this is a pretty important issue, I think, for all loan officers to consider, don't you?
I do, but so let me tell you how it works at my house. So when I come home, and I'm going to say most of the time, right? Most of the time how it works at my house is I come home, a rough day at the office, I was beating off the dragons, and they singed my eyebrows today, right?
Okay.
And the lovely Mrs. White, because things are good at home, because I understand the difference of marriage issues and roommate issues and deal with both, but keep them at the level, that she becomes my champion. And so she tell me more about that. Boy, I bet that was hard, but you can do it. She just constantly encourages me because things are good at home. When things aren't good at home, then it's like, well, you think your day was bad. Here, listen to mine for a little bit. And we've done that, right? And we try to one-up each other on how much our day sucked on that particular day, or how challenging it was. And when instead, if I'm getting my butt handed to me at work, which sometimes I do, it's like having the coach on the sidelines coming back in and having a halftime meeting saying, "You got this, Carl. You can handle this. This has happened before, and I'm behind you. And no matter what, we're going to get through this." And just knowing that no matter what happens, I still have a hand to hold, so to speak. It just puts everything in perspective. And it makes challenging days at work, at least I have the reprieve that when I go home, it's like a hot summer day jumping in that nice cool pond, that when I get home, I got my nice cool pond and it'll be okay. But look, none of us, keep it frank. None of us are going to starve. None of us are going to sleep outside, right? None of us. Things aren't going to be that bad. It might seem like it sometimes. And just keeping things in perspective and having my coach, the person that's got my back, right? My life mate, having my back, giving me support because things are good at home. I don't know. It makes the hard times not so hard, actually.
Carl, thank you so much for your time. I think this is great advice. Listen, when you go home, I heard somebody say one time, I decided to stay in today because I was going to enjoy my rent. Yeah. It's the same thing. I'm going to stay in today and I'm going to enjoy my house payment for the day. Make your house your sanctuary and use that to recharge your battery. So when you go to work, that's where we spend that energy, but we recharge our battery at home.
And I do understand, look, people go through hard times. I've been through hard times. Brian, I imagine you've been through it, like we all have, right?
Sure.
And frankly, some more than others. So somebody might be going through a very difficult time where maybe a beat and cheating addictions is very much in play. So, I'm not downplaying that. But what I'm saying is 98% of the time, it's not that. It's other things. And, once you understand the difference, you can work those through.
Changing habits is a really difficult thing to do. And so you were told this about a decade ago, and this is something that you implement in your relationship right now, which helps you with your work. And by the way, I've never seen you in a bad mood, so something's working. So was it difficult for you to implement initially?
Oh, to me, it was a light switch. I mean, it was like somebody pulled the scales off my eyes and I could see in color for the first time. It was an instant thing. And it just really brought the volume down of the noise in the house, for sure.
You just had to see it and recognize it. That was
It was an epiphany. It was an awakening for me, making a big deal out of nothing. It goes back to that old saying: "Don't sweat the small stuff," and it's all small stuff. Yeah. It's not all small stuff, but it's mostly small stuff.
I totally agree with that. Listen, this is great advice right now. If you find yourself having a hard time at work, your house becomes your sanctuary. This is a real easy one. Just acknowledge it, identify it, explain this to your spouse, and I'll bet you your relationship gets better. I'm going to implement this one today. This one's a no-brainer for me. Carl?
And if I can be so bold, when things are good at home, rumor has it one might get lucky, right? So then there's that. But that's a whole nother story. So thanks for having me on, Brian.
Thanks, Carl. We'll talk soon. Bye.